Welcome, friends. You're watching the Ruslan Belov channel, and today we're going to break down the situation in Ukraine as of February 27th, 2026. A tremendous amount of critically important events unfolded over the past 24 hours. So let's get straight to it. Frontline overview, February 27th, 2026. The situation across the front remains extraordinarily dynamic on several key axes simultaneously. Today's maps have undergone significant corrections, and in some sectors the changes are nothing short of dramatic. Let's go through each direction one by one. Zaporizhzhia sector. Ukraine's counteroffensive gains momentum. The most impactful developments of the day are unfolding on the Zaporizhzhia front, specifically on its northern flank, precisely the area where we repeatedly forecasted a potential Ukrainian counteroffensive operation. Today the map was corrected, and the shifts are substantial. To put this in perspective, as recently as February 24th, the frontline picture looked fundamentally different. And yet, in the span of just 3 days, the line has moved considerably. The Russian side has published an extensive array of footage documenting FPV drone strikes against the city of Orikhiv and across the entire Orikhiv axis, both from the south and the east. These videos make abundantly clear just how intense the fighting has become. Russian units are making active attempts to push forward, but are encountering fierce and organized resistance at every turn. Particularly noteworthy is footage from the areas of Ternova and Berezove, where significant concentrations of Ukrainian armored vehicles have been observed on the move. Armored personnel carriers and various other armored platforms. Drone strikes were recorded near a tree line to the southeast of Pryvilny, as well as in the corridor between Berezov and Ternova. It is precisely on the basis of this growing body of visual evidence that new map corrections have been made. The evidentiary foundation confirming Ukrainian advances continues to expand with each passing hour. Based on preliminary assessments, the scale of forces and equipment committed to this operation invites comparison with the Sudzha offensive in terms of operational intensity. Though it falls short of the sweeping Ukrainian counteroffensive of 2023 in terms of total resources deployed. Nevertheless, the sheer volume of hardware involved is genuinely remarkable. We haven't witnessed anything of this scale on this particular axis in quite some time. Hundreds of drones, armored columns, and substantial infantry formations are all in play simultaneously. What is particularly telling is the reaction from Russian military sources affiliated with the eastern grouping of forces. They are not denying the existence of the counteroffensive itself. Doing so would be impossible, given the avalanche of video evidence. But they are officially refusing to acknowledge the capture of specific settlements by Ukrainian forces. This tells us one very important thing. The battle is far from over. Ferocious meeting engagements are underway. The fog of war remains extremely dense, and the definitive picture will only come into focus over the coming days. This situation must be monitored closely. Dnipropetrovsk direction. Russian forces press from the north. On the Dnipropetrovsk axis, a significant operational development was recorded today. Russia's Ministry of Defense officially announced that the settlement of Belakovka has come under full Russian control. The strategic importance of this cannot be overstated. Belakovka is situated north of the Solena River, effectively on the Ukrainian-controlled bank, directly opposite Kolona Mezhevo, and in close proximity to Novopavlivka. Over the past several days, the map in this area has been revised multiple times. Adjustments were made around Belakovka itself, and the grey zone expanded near Molodetska and Novopodhorodne. The cumulative trajectory of these changes points to one clear conclusion. Russian units are making a deliberate and coordinated push toward Mezhova, seeking to envelop Novopavlivka from the north and strike at the least fortified sections of Ukraine's defensive line. The strategic goal is self-evident: to create a threat of encirclement and compel Ukraine's military leadership to divert reserves away from the Zaporizhzhia counteroffensive axis. In this sense, the Dnipropetrovsk direction appears to be serving a dual operational purpose. It is simultaneously an independent offensive thrust and a pressure instrument designed to stretch Ukrainian resources thin and force General Syrskyi to scatter his available reserves across multiple crisis points. It is worth recalling that just days ago, Russian forces also improved their positions directly in the Novopavlivka area, adding yet another layer of pressure to an already strained Ukrainian defensive posture in this region. Kostyantynivka sector, the offensive continues, but pace has slowed. On the Kostyantynivka front, fighting for the southern outskirts of the city has continued without pause for days on end. The logistics situation for the Ukrainian armed forces here has been severely compromised following the destruction of the dam in the northern section of the area. However, despite this significant operational disadvantage, the pace of the Russian advance has remained below initial expectations, suggesting that Ukraine managed to adapt to the changed circumstances and establish alternative supply routes more effectively than Russian planners had anticipated. Today's corrections were noted in the southern part of the city, in the vicinity of the Agricultural Technical College. Russian units continue to press persistently against the southern districts, striving to consolidate a foothold in the industrial zones and residential neighborhoods. It must be noted, however, that the map as it currently stands may not fully reflect the ground reality. The Russian command is keeping this operation under exceptionally tight information control, and reliable data is filtering through only in sparse quantities. The information environment here mirrors what we're seeing on the Zaporizhzhia axis. Deliberate opacity maintained by both sides. Slovyansk sector, encircling Lyman from the south and southeast. On the Slovyansk front, intelligence is emerging about the gradual forward movement of Russian units toward the settlements of Staryi Caravan and Brusivka, located on the Russian-controlled bank of the Siversky Donets River. The presumed operational objective is to reach and sever key Ukrainian logistical arteries, followed by the preparation of a siege and assault on Lyman from the south and southeast. For the moment, this information has been corroborated only by neutral cartographic sources, which have expanded the grey zone on this section of the map. Simultaneously, pro-Ukrainian mappers are recording corrections to the southeast of Alexandrivka. Of particular note is the visible concentration of Russian forces pressing toward the pocket between Lipivka and Reznikivka, a salient that formed as a result of the Russian advance along the M32 highway and in the areas of Kriva Luka and Kalaniki. Eliminating this exposed Ukrainian bulge clearly figures among the near-term operational priorities of the Russian command. A separate and potentially pivotal development comes from Drobyshiv. Footage published today from the center of the settlement appears to show a Russian flag. At this stage, the footage has not been conclusively verified. It remains unclear whether the flag was physically planted by Russian servicemen on the ground or whether it was placed by a drone. However, should this information be confirmed, it would represent a turning point in the battle for Drobyshev, and the frontline map would be adjusted accordingly to reflect a substantial Russian advance in this locality. Northern sectors, pressure toward Pizarivka, and explosive new developments near Sopich. On the northern sectors of the front, positional changes continue in the area of Semenivka. Over the past several days, Russian units have been steadily advancing, pushing in the direction of Verkhnya Pisarivka. Fighting for the adjacent woodland is expected to commence in the near term, after which Russian forces will, in all likelihood, continue their eastward drive toward Bily Kolodez, gradually closing the operational ring in this part of the front. Finally, and perhaps most sensationally, today a number of pro-Russian military analysts made statements that can, without exaggeration, be described as bombshell claims. According to their reports, Russian forces have initiated an assault on the settlement of Sopich, situated directly along the state border in the northern part of Sumy Oblast, in the vicinity of Orikhiv. Recall that throughout January and February, we tracked the steady advance of Russian units near Kharkivka and Komarivka, where we anticipated continued Russian momentum. Yet now it appears that an entirely separate flank has been activated, one that had received comparatively little attention until today. The objective here is the elimination of a Ukrainian salient from which UAF drone operators have been regularly launching strikes deep into Russian territory. If Russian forces succeed in cutting off this pocket, it would meaningfully degrade Ukraine's ability to conduct long-range drone operations from this area. The situation here demands close and continuous monitoring. Map corrections could follow in the very near future, and what develops here over the coming days may prove to be one of the more consequential developments on the northern axis. Strikes deep inside Russia, and Russia's retaliation across Ukraine. Turning now to the wider strategic picture, on February 27, 2026, Ukraine continued its campaign of large-scale strikes against targets deep inside Russian territory. As early as the previous evening, pro-Ukrainian sources had published route maps showing drone trajectories toward Moscow and toward Pskov Oblast. Russia's Ministry of Defense reported the interception of 167 drones between 14 and 20 khans on February 26, with an additional 53 destroyed overnight, 12 of which had been heading directly for the Russian capital. By the morning of February 27th, Russian air defenses reported the elimination of yet another 95 drones between 23 Onatan on the 26th and 07 Zyaz on the 27th, with the majority of these tracked over Belgorod, Bryansk, Voronezh, and Kaluga oblasts. Despite the overall effectiveness of Russian air defense in neutralizing the bulk of these strikes, Belgorod did sustain significant damage. The city was hit by a combination of drones and HIMARS rockets targeting energy infrastructure. Local authorities reported the interception of 16 rockets, yet approximately 60,000 residents were left without electricity, indicating that at least some projectiles reached their intended targets. A subsequent fresh wave of Ukrainian drones was then launched from Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, traversing the Donetsk region in the direction of Russia's southern territories. Prior to this, strikes had been carried out against Luhansk, where the city's oil refinery sustained damage, an industrial facility of considerable importance to the local war economy. Additionally, launches of Flamingo cruise missiles were recorded from Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. According to available data, these missiles traveled approximately 1,300 kilometers toward Kazan, the heartland of Russia's defense industrial complex, home to Geran drone production facilities, as well as manufacturing of Topol and Iskander ballistic missiles. A portion of the missiles broke north and targeted Kursk, where structural damage and civilian casualties were subsequently reported. In retaliation, Russia launched approximately 187 drones against targets across Ukraine throughout the night of February 26–27. Strikes were recorded in Chernihiv, Novhorod-Siversky, Sumy, Kharkiv, Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, Odessa, Chornomorsk, and Izmail. Kharkiv alone absorbed 13 guided aerial bomb strikes and 28 Geran drone impacts within a single 24-hour window. In Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, one strike caused a powerful secondary detonation, strongly suggesting a direct hit on an ammunition or weapons storage depot. Looking ahead, all of this escalation is unfolding against the backdrop of diplomatic maneuvering ahead of a new round of negotiations scheduled for the beginning of March. This time not in Geneva, but in the United Arab Emirates. The repeated venue changes are themselves telling. They reflect a broader uncertainty and instability in the negotiating process, with neither side prepared to make concessions that could produce a meaningful breakthrough. Expect the pace of strikes and counterstrikes to remain elevated in the days ahead, as both sides seek to strengthen their hand before sitting down at the table. That's all for today, dear friends. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel, leave your likes, and take care of yourselves. See you in the next update.